Hello, everybody, and thank you for pulling into the Palmetto Pitstop. My name is Adam. This is second week now without Tony, but if you are feeling a little down without a little Tony in your lives every week, you don't have to worry for very long because starting this Monday, we will be releasing our first episode of our new podcast, Ladies First, where here on Palmetto Pitstop, I have been sort of the ringleader, so to speak. Tony, that's his baby over there with the Ladies First podcast. It is a podcast focused on the South Carolina Gamecocks women's basketball team with also some focus on the Gamecocks in the WNBA. And he'll be doing coverage throughout the year, throughout the season, through the 2024-2025 season, as they chase back-to-back championships and potentially a start of their dynasty. So again, that is the Ladies First podcast hosted by Tony. That will be releasing this Monday, the Monday following the release of this podcast episode for Palmetto Pit Stop. Be sure to check it out. But that aside, thank you guys for tuning in again. We're going to be talking about Homestead and what a race we had there for the Straight Talk Wireless 400. I mean, it has not been an uncommon opinion that this was one of the best races of the current gen car. People have been all over Twitter, all over social media, saying that this might have been one of the greatest races of all time, and it is very, very hard to disagree. Homestead, I've always loved Homestead. Have very fond memories of that racetrack growing up, even if most of the memories are a little tainted because Jimmy Johnson would always be hoisting a championship trophy there. If you're not a Jimmy Johnson fan, then obviously you're going to be a little salty that it wasn't your driver hosting that trophy. But I've always loved that track. In the old NASCAR video games, I've loved it. I loved watching all the races there. And this past weekend, it was everything you would hope it would be and more. This car is perfect. It is tailor-made for these 1.5 mile tracks. And they nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. It did not feel like a gimmick at all. It did not feel like it was exposing something wrong with the sport. I could not tell you one thing wrong with this weekend, and it is such a breath of fresh air. In the last few weeks, I have said there's always controversy with NASCAR every week. There's something that somebody can point out. But this week, the only thing I can point out was that I wish I could watch it again without knowing what's going to happen. It was great from start to finish. Incredible racing, incredible finish. Tyler Reddick punching his ticket to the championship 4 in Phoenix. I am so excited about this, ladies and gentlemen. But let's get into the recap. Ryan Blaney starting off strong. He did not have a literal great start. He started the race in 20th, raced up to 4th by the end of stage 1. Kyle Larson has been going through it after being very, very strong these last few weeks. He has been in position, but something keeps getting in his way in these last 2 weeks. Last week was his pit stops. This week, it was kind of just him. And a little luck, of course, has to go into that as well. Good luck, bad luck. Because he hits the wall in stage 1, even though he was having a pretty good run to that point. Hits the wall, doesn't get any stage points. Tyler Reddick claims the first stage, getting him some momentum again. I mean, he really started this playoff run that he's on right now at the Charlotte Roval. Had to, of course, pick up all those spots, make a great drive to make sure he advanced. And after last week where he flipped after winning that stage in Vegas, I'm sure that 45 team is very excited. And you can see that in the post-race and all that. But it was just great throughout. We had a great battle for the end of stage 2 between Elliott and Hamlin. Hamlin hadn't won a stage since Indianapolis. Chase Elliott, I didn't realize this until they pointed it out on the broadcast, hasn't won a stage since the very first stage of the season. Stage 1 in the Daytona 500 was the last time Chase Elliott won a stage, and considering how consistent he's been, it's very surprising that he has not won more. He always seems to be there. He's always seems to be around. He gets these points. That's why he's made it this far in the playoffs, of course. But to just have one stage win coming in the very first stage of the year, that's very surprising to me. Denny Hamlin did hang on to win the stage there, stage 2. And everything really, really came down to pit stops. The pit stops. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't say that there. The pit stops were the deciding factor here. And it was not just how quickly you can get on and off pit road. It was when you got on and off pit road. And Tyler Reddick and Denny Hamlin made the most of theirs. They were able to run longer than everybody else, really waiting to hold out hope for a caution or just to get those fresher tires for later. Denny Hamlin had a really good car on the long runs. He was not good at the short runs. So he wanted those fresh tires. He wanted that advantage. And he was able to get it. And he really started to charge towards the end. Tyler Reddick, he was really hanging out there as long as he could, just leading laps. And eventually, he has to duck out, head down pit road. The fresh tires, you can see, this was definitely why, as a matter of fact, the racing was so good, is because there were multiple grooves. You could get up to the wall, and you can, we saw it with Tyler Reddick. You can get up against the wall. You saw those guys, they were getting within inches of the wall. And it actually cost Hamlin a little bit because he hit the wall at one point. But getting up against the wall, you get that momentum shot out of a cannon off the top. But then you could drive it in low like Ryan Blaney was doing throughout the race. You have that entry speed and exit speed. It's and with the tire wear, tires were extremely important during this race. And you saw that in that last pit cycle just before the late race caution. Tyler Reddick, as soon as he got out in front of, or got off a pit road, he just took off and he got his lap back right away. And that was when everything seemed to change, because you thought, oh, well, it's not going to matter. He's that far behind. That was kind of their Hail Mary there. Then Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson are battling for the lead. Ryan Blaney, he was up there all day. Kyle Larson, he comes back from hitting the wall, and he looks like he could punch his ticket to the championship for. And what he ends up doing is they go 3 wide. He has said this himself, that he's kicked himself in the butt when it comes to these decisions sometimes. These split-second decisions on whether to be aggressive or conservative. And this time it really bit him, because he's racing 3 wide and Austin Dillon trying to stay on the lead lap. No fault to him. You can't really pin any blame on Austin Dillon. He's up against the wall. That's, like I said, he's trying to stay on the lead lap. You have every right to stay on the lead lap. He's not crowding someone. He's not taking away. He's not closing up a lane that he shouldn't. It was just racing. Ryan Blaney goes low as he had, and Kyle Larson tries to shoot the gap. They make contact. Larson goes around, brings out a caution. He doesn't lose too many spots on the caution, but what ends up happening is, because he was spinning sideways, the roof flap deploys, and they have to sort of reset that with a panel underneath the car. So he lost a good number of spots on pit road after that. I think he lost about 6 spots. And Hamlin's crew, who has been very, very iffy all season, gets him out in second place. Where Tyler Reddick, waiting all those laps, just waiting, leading the laps, ends up benefiting him because he was only on 2-lap old tires when the caution comes out. It's not a huge difference made. You saw it on the restart. It did kind of make a difference at first because there is a bit of an advantage. But once the laps ticked away, They all kind of got on even footing, and then at that point, it was the better lines. But Larson's mistake ends up costing him another good finish and potentially a win. He ends up finishing outside the top 10. He finished 11th at Vegas, 13th at Homestead, and he's now outside of the playoffs right now, outside of that championship four after being one of the best drivers, if not the best driver, all season. I mean, you could say that Christopher Bell or Tyler Reddick have been the best drivers all season, but Kyle Larson's been the one to really put it together in the playoffs thus far. And he's won the elimination races the first two rounds. So I'm sure going into Martinsville, he's not feeling the pressure. But to enter Homestead plus 35 and then exit -7, it's pretty rough in the Larson camp. And if you're a Larson fan, you have to feel pretty frustrated with the way these last two races have turned out. But before we get into playoff implications and all that, let's talk about this last run. I mean, Hamlin looks like he's driving away with it, and you see that Ryan Blaney's getting to him. And he's getting to him. And then Reddick joins the fray. And Reddick, once these tires have sort of evened out, he's just, you can tell is he going to have enough time? That's the question. And with 2 laps to go, Hamlin's leading. And then Blaney gets the run on him, and he takes the lead at the white flag. We don't have any overtime to throw our hands up. We didn't have any gimmick at the end, any controversy. It was a clean race, and everything was perfect. And I cannot stress how great it is that these drivers raced each other clean, because they easily could have been beating and banging off of into these final few laps, but they weren't. They were giving each other the room that they needed, and while they were still taking the lanes, but just that rocket that I'm getting too excited. Tyler Reddick, once he had that upside lane, I can't believe Ryan Blaney gave him the outside like that. He just shot. It almost looked like the Hail Melon, just the way he rode that wall. And Tyler Reddick has had a few races this year where he just felt like he just choked it at the last second. And for example, you have the Chicago street race. He had Bowman in his sights. He had the fresher tires. He was there, and then he just slaps the wall, and he's resigned to a second place finish. But that wasn't the case. He could have hit the wall here. He could have bounced off of Blaney. The two of them could have wrecked off of 4, and Hamlin could have stolen it, almost like what happened at Richmond. But Reddick, after all of these playoffs, it just seemed like, where is Reddick? When is he going to show up? And it seemed like he showed up at the Roval. And after the flip at Vegas, it was, is this it? Is he done? To have a stage win, and it seems like you're coming alive only for your car to flip, and you're entering this race how many points out just to come in and win a stage and win the race. I can't talk well enough about Tyler Reddick's run. It was just those last few laps, you were on the edge of your seat, if not standing. And it was such a clean finish. You saw, this is what got me upset back at the Richmond race, where Austin Dillon dive bombs Joey Logano, wipes him out, right hooks Denny Hamlin, takes him out and wins. And people just said, that's racing. You got to deal with it. There, you can respect your fellow competitors and still win. All of these guys, they're all going for a championship. Blaney's going for his second in a row, which hasn't been done in this format yet. Denny's obviously towards the end of his career, still looking for his first. Tyler Reddick, regular season champion, looked like he was going to flicker out after such a hot regular season. They all race each other clean. They don't wall each other. They don't door each other. They don't hook someone for the win. This was racing in its purest form. And I could not have been happier with this race. there was nothing about it that I could complain about. If I'm complaining about anything, it would be just to complain. I would be complaining to hear myself talk. And that would just be it would be a disservice to the sport. And you can't. This was the I know people say that Atlanta was the best race. Atlanta won. Kansas won was the best race. Personally, I thought this was the best race of the season, if not one of the best races at Homestead I've ever seen. So, for anyone who has any reservations about this car or about these tracks, there is something here. Finally, we can see that there is something here. And these mile and a halves, they have been this Gen 7 car's bread and butter. Like I said, you have Kansas, Atlanta, even though it is or not a super speedway, but is a drafting track now. In a few years, it won't be. Once that surface wears down a bit, it won't be a drafting track anymore. It is gonna, or maybe it won't be. I don't know how that's gonna really affect it, but it will probably be like how we saw Daytona in the mid 2000s, where these cars are really struggling to hang on. It's like a super, what are the words I'm looking for? It's hard to handle. Like, it's a very difficult track, but that's what made the racing so great in the mid 2000s at Daytona, was because it was a worn surface. And we can get that with Atlanta. But I think what NASCAR needs to do is realize, if this is the car you're sticking with, if this spec car is what you are going, you're essentially saying, we will go down with the ship on this Gen 7 car, or we will go to the stars with it. You need to accommodate that, because you have these tracks that are great with this car. Homestead, beautiful. Kansas, beautiful. Darlington is fun. Charlotte is fun. You have to get rid of, please, this is my number one complaint, and it's not even about Homestead. It has just reminded me. Get rid of the Roval, bring back the second Charlotte date. Just let them race on these tracks that these guys are the best at. Oval racing is what this sport was built on, and it is what is best now, are ovals, mile and a halves, stuff like Kansas, stuff like Homestead. That's what we want. That's what the fans want. The fans loved what they saw. Unless you were specifically a Ryan Blaney fan who's upset that they got passed on the last corner, or you are a Kyle Larson fan who is upset that he took himself out of the race twice. The first time was a blown tire, but he took himself out of the race on a move. Unless you're a Denny Hamlin fan who's upset that he was leading late and couldn't get it done, I don't see how you had a complaint about Homestead. It was a great race. Great finish. Great call by Lee Diffie, as always. I don't know how, but NASCAR needs to figure out how to get him on the call for everything. Make him the voice of NASCAR if you have to be. Or if you have the means, make him the voice of NASCAR. That man makes everything super, super exciting. But, to finish aside, let's go to the top 10. We had some pretty impressive finishes. AJ Allmendinger, not usually known for his oval racing skills, comes home in 8th. Carson Hocevar looked like he was a vet out there. Carson Hocevar, people have their reservations about him for some of the things he does. I mean, we saw what happened in the Craftsman Truck Series championship race last year with Carson Hocevar, and that was kind of him at his worst. And, you know, when you do these things that people have a hard time changing their opinion. I mean, you can do one thing in one race and it be the only time you ever do it, and that's all some people will remember you for. there are people out there who think Bubba Wallace is still the guy who hooked Kyle Larson at Vegas, but he's not the same guy. He's a better person now. He's a better driver, both in the field and as a competitor. He's more consistent, obviously. Playoff driver in last year and was a bubble driver this year. You have these guys. I mean, personally, I can attest because I don't even remember if this is how things went down, but it's what my memory is of it. But I believe it was 2007 Atlanta or something, and Tony Stewart and Jimmy Johnson were racing each other. And it was for the win, I'm relatively sure. And Jimmy Johnson, like I said, I don't know if this is actually what happened or if it's just what my memory says happened. But I just remember Jimmy Johnson kind of putting Tony in the wall a little bit, and that kind of sealed his win. You have people who still hate Kyle Busch because of 2008 Richmond. It is very, very hard to get people to change their opinions about you. But Carson Hocevar, he's a young dude. He's going to make his mistakes, but he's going to mature. And that's all you can hope for because the talent is there. He's doing this in Spire equipment. He ran up front all day. He finished in the top 10. Carson Hocevar is a name that people should come to know because he is a driver with talent. He is good. He is going to be very good in this sport. Carson Hocevar, still a rookie, looks like he's a vet. He looked like a vet at Homestead. Looked like he had a very solid day, put it together, and came home with a good finish. And if he can do that in Spire equipment, imagine if you get him in Hendrick equipment or Joe Gibbs equipment or any other higher end team. It doesn't even have to be one of the Blue Bloods. Just a team with consistent equipment and pit crews and all of that. If you can get them in some good equipment, you can expect Carson Hocevar to win a lot in this series. And it's a surprise that a lot of the younger guys haven't won. I mean, I've been expecting Ty Gibbs to win any day now. He's kind of faded away in the playoffs, but the talent is there. The talent for Ty Gibbs is undeniable. Noah Gragson, I think, just needs a little bit of seasoning, but I think his talent is there. It's a surprise that these younger guys haven't won yet. But Carson Hocevar, if he's the first one of this next generation to win a race, I would not be surprised at all. He has proven he can compete on these tracks, and sometimes you don't even need to compete on the 1.5 miles and such if you can just get it done on super speedways. But he can get it done, I believe, on these 1.5 miles, these cookie cutters as they've been referred to in the past. So Carson Hocevar, like I said, keep an eye on him. It's not a hot take at all. I'm relatively sure he is first in the Rookie of the Year standings. He might have wrapped it up. I'm not too sure, but I would be surprised if anybody else has even come close. But can't say enough about Carson Hocevar. He's very, in my opinion, he's easy to root for. I know people, he's left a bitter taste in their mouths with some of the stuff he's done in lower series, but he's very good. And I can't wait to see him hoisting trophies in the future. To round out the top 10, you had Ryan Preece just quietly in a top 10, and you had 10th, 11th, and 12th of Stewart Haas drivers, with, I believe, Noah Gragson being the lowest one out of all of them. But overall, just traditionally great NASCAR race, and an exceptional one. For when NASCAR made these playoffs, they wanted races like this, where the entire way there's not one complaint, and I have zero. And it's a breath of fresh air, like I said. NASCAR, if we can, figure out a way to get more races like this. But I know asking for a race like this every weekend is just not going to happen. It's not possible. If every race is exciting and incredible and historic, then they're going to lose their luster after a while. There's a reason why we remember good races. It's because they're great races. Not every race is going to be a fantastic race. Not every race is going to be like the last weekend. Not every race is going to be a 2011 Homestead where Tony Stewart's driving, passing cars left and right, passing over 100 cars, trying to win the race just so he can tie and win a championship. So you have to temper expectations a bit. Every race is not going to be perfect, but you do want to see more out of NASCAR in these mile and a halves. But as we put Homestead sadly in the rearview mirror, we'll be seeing it sooner than expected. Obviously not a playoff race next year, which is depressing. Very sad that it is not a playoff race, especially with what we've just seen. But I believe that they are putting in a bid for 2026 to be the championship race, which they absolutely should. They should host that thing, and it should not even come into question. As long as that track is standing and they can host races, let them host the championship. That place is built for the championship. But we'll enjoy the show that it put on for us this past weekend, and we'll move on looking ahead to Martinsville. The points, the all-important standing, 6 drivers now remain not locked into the playoffs. The 2 that have been able to secure their slots, of course, Tyler Reddick, as we just mentioned, and Joey Logano. 2 of the 4 slots, excuse me, 2 of the 4 slots secure for the Championship 4 in Phoenix. You have third place with Christopher Bell, who has come alive in these playoffs. I had him as an early exit in the playoffs. In my predictions, I said he wouldn't get it past the round of 8 because I thought he was too inconsistent. Those top 30 or those 30th or worst finishes were going to catch up to him. And he probably, if he heard that, he probably scoffed and then went on to put on a clinic in the playoffs because he's been fantastic. I believe one of the best average finishing drivers in the playoffs. Plus 29, not secure yet, but he's pretty good at Martinsville. So hard to say that he was one with who's feeling the pressure just yet. But someone who is William Byron, only up 7, won in the spring, but that's not going to really matter what he did in the spring soon. Below the cut line, Kyle Larson. Surprising to see him here. I did not think that he would be somebody anywhere close to elimination. He's just seemed so good. And I had him as basically a lock for the Championship 4. And he could risk elimination. I mean, these last 2 races, he's been outside the top 10, which it's not like that's terrible, but when everyone else is outperforming you, it kind of is. Joey Logano really threw a wrench in everything. Obviously, if he doesn't win, Larson's in right now. And the HMS has 2 cars in the Final 4 heading into Martinsville. You have Denny Hamlin, minus 18. Again, just at war with the Final 8, or the round of 8. Heading into Martinsville, he's not had much luck here. Hasn't won here since 2015, I believe. And I can't remember when the last time he won the fall race was. Ryan Blaney, defending champion, minus 38. And Chase Elliott, again, very surprising, but that crash at Las Vegas not doing him any favors. He is minus 43, so it's looking like Chase Elliott may be the first case of winning in. Ryan Blaney as well could be the case. 2 cases definitely of winning in, but it could be that all 6 of them want to secure that win. They don't want one of these guys jumping up. If you're William Byron, you want to go out there and make sure that none of these guys jump you in points on a Hail Melon style run. If you're Elliott, you want to go out there because you probably have to go out there and win if you want a chance at the championship. Blaney, if you want to go back to back, you got to go win. He did win this race last year in this spot. Hamlin, I'm sure, is exhausted at this point and bored of the fact that he is always in this predicament in the round of 8, having to go into Martinsville and dominate and win. And he's dominated Martinsville, but he hasn't won there. And that has been the reason for his absence from the Final Four the last few years. Kyle Larson, I don't think... I don't want to say there's not pressure on him because he is below the cut line, but if there's pressure on him, is that gonna make diamonds or is it gonna make dust? Because these last 2 weeks have been questionable for the 5 team. If you don't have those screw ups at Vegas with the pit stops, and obviously you don't spin yourself out trying to go 3 wide for the lead. He did what Reddick did just later in the race, and now these last 2 years, Larson has had a chance at the win be taken away from him at Homestead. Both at his own, at the fault of himself, because last year at Homestead he was trying to make up as much ground on Blaney as he could and slammed into the sand barricades. And this year, of course, setting it 3 wide between Austin Dillon and Ryan Blaney. So I don't know if Larson can stand to just go out there and win like he did the last 2 times, because is he going to be able to? I mean, I imagine he's not just going to run like he was these last 2 races and be okay with that. So I imagine he's going to put the pressure on himself. You expect these guys to go out there and just go crazy and put the best performance on. I expect Martinsville to be super competitive. I mean, you have Bell, Byron, Larson, Hamlin, Blaney, Elliott all fighting for a shot at a championship. These guys are not just going to lay down and die. There's no one here who's just happy they got there. These are some of the best drivers this season. William Byron, he made obviously the championship for last year. Probably should have won it off the old standings, the Winston Cup standings, Ladford system. Christopher Bell, he's made the Final Four the last couple of years. Ryan Blaney, of course, the defending champion. And Chase Elliott, he's been Mr. Consistent. One of the best drivers all season, just in terms of consistency. But, of course, just the 1 win at Texas to put that locked him into the playoffs. It's surprising to see him down there, but that's just kind of a testament to the talent pool in the playoffs this year. The final 8, minus Joey Logano, if Alex Bowman doesn't get that penalty at Charlotte, this would be the best 8 drivers you can have racing for a title, because it's the top 8 drivers at the time. It was the top 8 drivers in the playoffs without playoff points. So you're just going to have these guys. You saw a few times at Homestead where the top 7 drivers of the field were the 7 drivers trying to win. And then you had Joey Logano hanging around there in like 19th or wherever he ended up finishing. But yeah, I imagine someone's going to try something at Martinsville to try and win because they have to. I expect that out of Blaney or Elliott. Blaney has done it already. Like I said, he did it last year in this spot. He went out and won Martinsville when he had to. So he's used to the pressure. But what are, Larson, Hamlin, Elliott, Byron, Bell going to do to make sure he doesn't? But like I said, there's no use in even looking at the past trends because we're going to get some completely different tires for this race coming up. We have the right side option tire, what we saw at North Wilkesboro and the second Richmond race, which you saw Daniel Suarez ripping around the track on. And then the left sides are the softest compound Goodyear has made for this car. So they also said it was going to be the softest compound for I think it was Bristol, and that race ended up being one of the worst races I've ever. I didn't watch the race in full, and I'm kind of glad I didn't because what I did see, it was not great. It was just follow the leader minus Kyle Larson, who was the leader and just kind of drove away from everybody. So I can understand why drivers, if they're a little hesitant to be excited about this race. But if this tire works out like it's supposed to, and we get another race like Homestead, this little home stretch here from Vegas to Phoenix could be fantastic. So we also Martinsville's kind of a place of legend in this sport. I mean, it's the oldest track on the circuit, as well as North Wilkesboro, there since day one. We just in postseason, in this playoff era. I mean, you had Denny Hamlin, who had the run-in with Alex Bowman a few years back, doing he's just a hack whole spiel after the race. Denny Hamlin taking out Chase Elliott a few years back, and then of course the Hail Melon in 2022. And it's now that I'm reading off this list of moments, it's kind of making me realize how much Martinsville hates Denny Hamlin, which is surprising considering he is a Virginia native. But it's anybody's game at this track, and with this tire, who knows? I think this tire is going to, if it works as performed, it's going to bring out the best drivers of the field. And whether that's a playoff driver or someone who just handles the strategy better than the others, they could play spoiler, but I wonder what that does for the playoffs. Because if Elliott's up there winning stages, but ends up finishing second, and I don't know, Alex Bowman decides to finish off the race and win, then where does that put Elliott? So I have a strong feeling that a championship or a playoff driver is going to win, and that's what my predictions are, or that playoff drivers are going to win, because I think these are the best drivers this year. And with all the pressure on them to go out and win a championship, you're going to see who folds under pressure and who rises to the occasion. And as for predictions, I know it seemed like I just spent the last, 30-something minutes talking about how he's fumbled opportunities, but how do you count out Kyle Larson from winning this race? He's won both elimination races thus far. I can't see him getting eliminated. I cannot, whether he wins or just points his way in, I can't see Kyle Larson not making the Final Four after the season he's had. Like, the Joey Logano thing really messed everything up. There are drivers who deserve to be fighting for this championship, even in this format, and that win at Vegas just threw it all out the window, because Kyle Larson, if we are trying to determine the best driver in the sport, Kyle Larson deserves to be in the playoff Final Four. Right now, I think if it was just off of who's the best drivers throughout and you want to pick a Final Four, it should be Bell, Larson, Reddick, and you can toss up Byron or Hamlin. But whatever. It's not worth complaining about. Anyway, speaking of Byron, he is my second pick. He's a driver I criticized for disappearing before the playoffs. After that win, his third win, I think it was at Coda, he's just gone radio silent. Or was it at Martinsville? It might have been at Martinsville. I can't remember which came first. But that was the last time he won. I said he's been radio silent ever since. Playoffs started, he's one of the most consistent drivers. So I can't see a Hendrick driver not making the Final Four, but there is the possibility that a Hendrick driver does not make the Final Four. If Ryan Blaney wins and the points remain somewhat similar to they are, no Hendrick driver is racing for a championship this year. If Ryan Blaney wins and points stay the same, it will be Reddick, Logano, Bell, and Blaney. Two Penske guys in there as well, going to try to compete for the three-peat, by the way. I can't see that happening. I can't see Hendrick not getting in, but what I can see is Ryan Blaney winning, who is my third pick. He is still my pick for the championship. He's done it before in this position. He hasn't won since Pocono, but he's been in position. He finished second last week. And it just seems like he's is at the point where he's kind of like how Reddick was during the regular season, letting these opportunities just slip through the cracks. And if he can just put it together like he did last year, again, like I said, it's basically useless to use old trends because this is going to be a completely different race depending on how these tires work out. So, but I would not be shocked if Ryan Blaney wins. So again, my three picks, they might be safe picks, but they are who I think will win this race. Kyle Larson, William Byron, Ryan Blaney. I don't see how, if any of them are in victory lane, no one's going to be shocked. If Hamlin's in victory lane, if Bell is in victory lane, if Reddick wants to play spoiler and wins again, I don't know if he will, not at Martinsville, but if he wants to, would anyone be surprised to see any of these drivers in the final 8 win? I wouldn't even be surprised if Logano goes out there and just spoils the party, because that's just something that Logano would do. Just be absolutely nowhere to be seen at Homestead, and then all of a sudden pop up, spoil Hendrick's party. Or maybe it would help him, because it wouldn't be a new winner. But it would be preventing one of these lower guys from winning their way in. So there is a lot to look forward to going into Martinsville, and I anticipate this for the first time. I'm feeling very confident in a short track producing good racing. And in this next gen car, that feels a little iffy. A little iffy. But I have a strong feeling that this is going to be good. But we'll see how it goes. But now that we have recapped Homestead and we've looked ahead to Martinsville, the final turn as we drive on in, I thought it would be a good idea, as we are now just 2 races remaining in the 2024 season. This time in 2 weeks, we will know who our champion is. We will know who has etched their name into the annals of NASCAR history. What is the best schedule for the playoffs? Now, I did a little thinking on this, and I've decided to come up with what I think would be a great final 10 races if NASCAR is to stick with this elimination format. I did not make any changes to the scoring. I did not make any changes to how many races are in each round. It is exactly the same. All I have done is I have laid out a schedule for the final 10 races of the elimination-style NASCAR playoffs. And I will not be using any tracks that are no longer on the circuit or tracks that no longer exist. So I won't say, week 1 will be Fontana, and then week 2 would be Kentucky, and week 3 Chicagoland. I'm going to go to only tracks that they still race at today. So, that being said, my round of 16, opening week, Darlington, the Southern 500. I think that's good. That is what it's going to be for the foreseeable future. It is... Darlington produces great racing. I got to see the Southern 500, my first Crown Jewel race this year, and it was some great racing and a great finish, and I think it's perfect for the opening round of the playoffs. The second race is, I believe, one that I think should stay in the playoffs, but is leaving the playoffs. Atlanta, as the years go on with this new surface, is only going to get better. We're seeing a kind of an in-between, as we did in the Atlanta race this year, or in the second Atlanta race this year. It wasn't that craziness that you saw early in the year in the second race. But Atlanta, once it wears down a bit, is going to produce some fantastic racing consistently. And I think that would make for a great second race. And the third one, and I'm kind of cheating because I just said I'm not using races that are no longer on the schedule, but it is on the schedule, just in a different fashion. The first elimination race in the round of 16, the Charlotte Oval. Get rid of the Roval, put this car on 1.5 mile tracks where it belongs. I don't think you need the Roval gimmick. I think that track is fine, especially with this car. It produces great racing. The Charlotte playoff race is a staple. It has always been a staple. Keep it a staple. That's just how it should be. I just think that the Charlotte Oval deserves a place in the postseason, and as the first elimination race, I think it would be perfect. The first race of the round of 12, I would put as Talladega. Talladega is always going to be a playoff race. Don't listen to anyone who says otherwise. It's always going to be a playoff race. But I think next year, with it being in the round of 8, is a bit iffy. I'm not sure how that's going to work out just yet. But I want to put it as the first race instead of the second race, because when these big ones happen, and you know they're going to happen, I think drivers should have a bit of a chance to recapture some of the points they might lose at a track where anything can happen. So I think Talladega as an opening race for a round would be pretty good. And then another track that is losing its playoff race next year is Watkins Glen. So people don't care for Watkins Glen in this car, I should say, in this car. People love Watkins Glen as a track. It's just this car on road courses is iffy. But I love Watkins Glen. I understand wanting to keep a road course in the playoffs, and I think Watkins Glen should be that road course. And then finally, I think it should not be the opening race. I think it should be the elimination race is Kansas. Kansas always produces great racing. I love Kansas. Everybody loves Kansas. It might be the best track on the schedule right now, minus, Homestead. It is probably the best track we go to twice at least. And as the elimination round for the round of 12, or the elimination race for the round of 12, I think it would be perfect. And then opening the round of 8, Martinsville. I think you have to keep Martinsville there. We'll see how this race goes on Sunday, if this tire compound helps save this track a little bit. I think it's a good opening track. I want to keep it in that round of 8. I just don't know about it as a elimination race, though it does produce some good moments. This one, it's a little interchangeable, but I think that's a good one. And then the surprise one, I think, the round of the 8th race of the playoffs, I would put Michigan. Michigan was a very good race this year. I loved what I saw at Michigan. If that was a playoff race, I think it should at least have a chance. And if it helps decide the championship 4, I wouldn't be too mad at it. If you can't tell, I'm trying to keep these tracks kind of traditional, these ovals, and Michigan, you could kind of swap it with like Vegas or something if you want like these open tracks, but I think Michigan was just really fun this year. And if that's going to be how the racing is, keep Michigan, put Michigan in the playoffs. Give it a try even. And then the elimination round, so NASCAR kind of stays happy with its importance, is Phoenix. So I'm a bit of a homer, a bit of a nostalgia guy. Having Phoenix as the second to last race of the year just kind of seems right. Go to a track that my biggest change would be go to Phoenix once, and it's in the cutoff race. I think the cutoff race should be a track you go to once. I think the championship track should be a track you go to once. Otherwise, you kind of get an idea of who's going to do what. But Phoenix as a cutoff race, I wouldn't mind, because, that's what we've basically been seeing with Martinsville, or this kind of short track racing. And if you put it as the cutoff race, people kind of stay happy. It keeps its importance there. The owners keep, their little neon cactus that they care about so much, and it maintains its relevance as an elimination race. And then, to no surprise, the season finale championship race, Homestead-Miami. Why did we move from there? I think we know why, but we're not going to go into it. But as just a little recap, race 1, Darlington. Race 2, Atlanta. Race 3, the Charlotte Oval. Eliminate 4 drivers. Talladega, Watkins Glen, Kansas. On to the round of 8. Martinsville, Michigan, Phoenix, and then the championship race at Homestead-Miami. So, this week, we eliminate 4 drivers. Their seasons come to an end at Martinsville. And we have 4 drivers who will compete for the championship title, the honors of being the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series champion. And I could not be more excited to see what these option tires do for this track, because if it's as hectic as Richmond will be, what craziness will we see at Martinsville? What will people do for a chance at immortality in the sport? But thank you guys so much for watching once again. We are releasing episode 1 of our Ladies First podcast. Tony hosting that one with a preview of their trip to Vegas, their opener against Michigan, and a look at their upcoming season overall for the ladies South Carolina Gamecocks women's basketball team. That is the Ladies First podcast hosted by Tony. The first episode comes out Monday. I believe that is Monday, November 4th, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, yes, Monday, November 4th, the same day as their tip-off, their first game of the season for the South Carolina Gamecocks women's basketball team, defending champions, looking to go back-to-back, looking to start that dynasty, cement it, 3 of the last 4. Thank you guys for pulling in to the Palmetto Pitstop. I have been Adam. Hopefully next week after Martinsville, we'll get Tony back here, maybe chat with him a little about his podcast. But thank you guys again. We will see you next time.